Welcome to Backstage Pass with Gail Davis, your invitation into the world of keynote speaking and event planning expertise. Join us as we pull back the curtain and dive into exclusive interviews with speaking industry experts. From seasoned speakers to master event planners, we're here to provide you with the ultimate backstage experience. Get ready to unlock valuable insights, tips, and strategies that will elevate your events and leave your audience inspired. Hello, my name is Gail Davis, and I am your host for Backstage Pass. I am really excited to record our first episode for the new year, and what an appropriate guest, Suneel Gupta, who is an expert on connecting well-being and performance. And I know at the beginning of the year, everybody's all about being the best version of themselves. He is a healthcare entrepreneur, a best-selling author. He hosts the American Express Business Class docuseries, and he's a visiting scholar at Harvard Medical School. Hello, how are you? Welcome.
Gail, so good to be back with you.
I love your mission. It's very inspiring to me that you want to help people reset, reignite, and find meaning in their work by bolstering emotional resilience and engagement.
That's, and there's a lot of work to do.
There is, isn't there? Well, maybe we should just kind of start right there. I know this talk resonates with everyone who's in your audience because energy, which is one of your big topics, is something that affects everyone. Can you walk through that content and what your keynote experience is like and really lean into that part? There's a lot of work to do because I find that interesting.
Yeah. I mean, when we look at people who are able to reach their potential in life versus people who don't, which is where I focus, been focusing the past 10, 15 years of my research is really on sort of what distinguishes outstanding performers. One of the things that we realize is that people who fizzle out, that includes teams and leaders who don't reach their potential, very rarely do they run out of time or talent. What they almost always run out of is energy. They simply just don't have enough gas in the tank to continue doing what they want to do. And without energy, you might have the best goals, you might have the best vision, yeah, you might have a great roadmap, but you're not going to be able to get to where you want to be. It is literally the fuel that takes you from where you are to where you want to go. And the reason that matters, and especially right now, is because everywhere we look, people are running out of energy. And we see it in our friends, we see it in our family, we see it in our coworkers. It's all around us. 70% of the workforce says that they are extremely exhausted. And by the way, one of the misconceptions is that this is something that just afflicts people who are relatively new in the workforce. Millennials, Gen Z. Not true at all. It's something that is true across all levels, across all ages. 40% of C-suite leaders right now are considering leaving their jobs over the next 12 months because they're exhausted. And I work one-on-one with a lot of these C-suite leaders. I do a lot of coaching myself, and one of the things I often hear is, look, this is really frustrating because I have more experience, I have more knowledge, I have more wisdom, but the one thing that I have less of is energy. And so I literally don't have this resource that I need to deploy all this other good stuff that I have built and accumulated throughout my career.
This is perfect timing. A member of my team this morning, she and I were talking, and she was sharing with me that one of her clients was musing during their speaker selection process, and she
Yeah.
shared a concern for their organization, and it's practically this. She said, I wrote it down, we have come to the realization that the C-suite level executives don't get much traditional leadership training or coaching. And it seems that once they've reached the C-suite level, they don't or can't focus on their own personal and professional development.
Huh.
This year, we want to go back to basics and find a speaker that can speak to leadership development for the top executives. So I suspect this is very widespread. And I also suspect that often your audience has a bunch of salespeople and the C-suite.
Mm.
So how do you how do you deliver your message and how do you tailor it when you've got that combination, including the top leadership of the company?
Yeah, yeah. So, my number one priority on stage is to give my audience very, very practical tools and techniques that they can put into immediate practice to elevate their energy and the energy of the people around them. And, oftentimes there's this misconception that when we think about something like energy management, what we're really talking about is, I have to go eat, pray, love my way back to a better place of balance, right? I have to go escape. I have to go, take a one-way trip to go meditate on a mountaintop, in order to get myself back to this place where I feel rested and I feel like I'm back in a place where I can be fully activated. And that's simply not true, right? And by the way, that's a good thing because most of us don't have the liberty or the luxury to be able to take these long vacations and go do these things. We have work to do. Now we have a lot of work to do. And when we're talking specifically about people who are sort of senior leaders, it is absolutely overwhelming. And so if I came up on stage and I said, "Hey, you need to go take a long break," that's just not very practical, right? And I know this as somebody who has led large teams and has started my own company and sold a company and taken a company public. It's just not practical advice. So, what I think is more practical are what are the simple things that we can do right now without interrupting the flow of our day, without interrupting our goals and what we need to do in order to elevate not only our energy, but our performance. And the good news is that those tools are out there. So, for example, one of the things that I realized that great leaders do is they practice what I call rhythmic renewal, which is that they're not waiting for long breaks, they're not waiting for vacations in order to get rest. What they're doing is they're taking tiny bits of rest throughout the day, every single day. And Martha Stewart, for example, when I sat down with her, she's 82 years old and she literally has the energy of a 22-year-old. I mean, she was dancing circles around her team. I had a tough time keeping up with her, and I consider myself to be pretty high energy. What I realized is that throughout her day, even though she has so many different things going on, she's building partnerships, building brands. One of the things that she's always doing is she's taking these little breaks. She's horseback riding, she is gardening, she is doing dishes, which often keeps her calm. She's interacting with people that she loves. So she's taking these little quick 5-minute breaks. I've noticed this to be a pattern amongst the many, many leaders that I've studied around the world, from Oscar-winning filmmakers to celebrity chefs to coaches of professional sports teams. They're taking these little moments of rest, which is how they're able to increase the capacity that they're able to bring to all the demands in their life. And I think that's, Gail, I think that's really the key, which is that when we talk about being able to get to a place where we are more energetic, more energized for our work, sometimes the misconception might be that you need to lower the demands in your life. You need to start doing less. And that is an option, but it's usually not an option for people who are, want to get a lot done and have a lot of responsibility. So the other option that we don't talk about nearly enough is to increase your capacity to meet those demands. So instead of reducing the demands, you're increasing your capacity. Then again, my number one goal is to give you some very, very practical tools and techniques you can put into practice immediately to increase that capacity.
And what did you call these little breaks?
So I call them rhythmic renewal. And
Gotta
and
write that down. I love that.
and I like the word rhythm, right? Because sometimes we sort of what our pattern tends to be when it comes to rest is that we tend to get ourselves to a point where we are sort of in the red. So think of a traffic light, green, yellow, red. We get ourselves to the red and then we say, let me go take a break, right? Let me go take a vacation. Let me go take a week off. It sounds good and it sounds noble, but the problem is this. Neuroscientists call this the paradox of recovery, which is that basically the more stressed out you are, the harder it is to find relief, right? So you would imagine that if you are really stressed out, it's going to be really easy for you then to just decompress and relax, but it's not. And this is why it takes people a few days into vacation to actually get to a place of rest. And it's also, by the way, one of the reasons that most people feel stressed out, more stressed 1 week after vacation than they actually did 1 week before vacation, right? So vacations, look, I'm not knocking on vacations. They're a wonderful instrument for spending time with friends and family, potentially seeing different parts of the world. Vacations have their role in our society, but we have been over relying on them as an instrument for dealing with exhaustion. They're actually not a very effective tool for dealing with exhaustion and burnout. What is much more effective is when we can build this rhythm into our days where we're taking these tiny little breaks. There was a study done on Microsoft where they gave everybody an electroencephalography cap, or otherwise known as an EEG cap. So that measures brain activity, right? And it also measures stress level. And what they did is they divided people into two groups. So group A, they kind of had the schedule that most of us keep, which is they kind of take their day back to back to back. You're clicking off of one link, you're clicking onto another. You're leaving one meeting, you're going to another, right? That's the way most of us live our days. And that was group A. Group B, same demands, same schedule, same priorities, same deadlines, but they were just taking 5-minute breaks throughout the day. And when you look at the brain scans, the composites, it's night and day. The people who are group A took no breaks. By the end of the day, it's a lot of red. Like it's the composite is fried. Like they're going home, they're exhausted. People who are just taking little breaks throughout the day, they started the day fresh, they maintained that level of freshness throughout the day, and then they ended it with freshness. Now, if you're listening to this, I want you to also just realize that this is not something that you are doing purely for yourself, right? Because when you are more in the blue, when you have better brain waves, that is rubbing off, especially if you're a leader, on everybody around you, right? Everybody, your colleagues, your friends, your family, everybody's energy is being lifted because you're in a better state. And that's the thing about energy. It's different than time. Time is a non-renewable resource, right? Once you have an hour, like I can't take an hour off my schedule and add it to your schedule. But what I can do is I can lift your energy. And by the way, that could also drain your energy. And so the way that I walk into a room as a leader in particular is directly going to affect the people around me. And people, we call this emotional contagion, right? So my emotions, my energy directly affects your energy as well.
I love this. And my condo is literally 3 blocks from my office. And it's so amazing to me. Like, I love to walk to work. Today it's like 20 degrees, so I will admit I didn't do it. Um, but I love to walk to work and just like think about the meeting that I'm going into and how I want to show up. And that has made a huge difference, I think, in my leadership style. And I would say about 2 or 3 years ago, I told my assistant, I can't do it anymore. I can't go back to back. It is so stressful. I need just a little break. I like to think of like that childhood toy and Etch a Sketch. I'm like,
Yeah.
I need to take my brain, I need to tidy up the ends, I need to etch a sketch, I need to take a breath, and then I need to go into the next meeting. And I think you're 100% right. I think it has been a game changer in how I'm perceived and the overall vibe of this team.
I love that you do that, Gail, because so few leaders do. And again, part of the reason that we don't is because we have been conditioned to view rest as a reward, right? These little
Mhm.
moments of rest, we have been conditioned to believe that we have to earn those, right? And that sounds noble. It sounds like a gritty, hardworking attitude, and I get it. And like, trust me, I've been there. The problem is that it's really out of touch with the science of human performance. What the science of human performance tells us is that rest is actually not a reward. It is not a reward for what you have done. It is actually a resource for what you are about to do. And by the way, it's not just a resource to your point. It's not just a resource for you. It's a resource for everybody else as well. And again, like one thing that we just have to like, I have to reemphasize because we talked about in the very beginning is like, I know people are going to listen to this and are gonna like say, okay, I get it. Sounds good, but I don't have the time. I'm too back to back. My to-do list is too long. The thing that I want to emphasize is it does not take a long time. Sometimes I'm thinking your etch a sketch. I love that metaphor. To sort of wipe it clean, it can take seconds. It literally just getting into a corner of a room. Sometimes I like to put my hand over my chest, my over hand over my heart. Just take 3 deep breaths, and that's enough to hit the reset button to bring this level of energy that we want to bring to our teams.
I was wondering, I know I almost interrupted you a couple of times, but if you think this is cultural, because I know I had a 20-year career before I started GDA Speakers, and that environment was very 24/7, all the time, always on. It was a badge of honor to just, oh, I worked till 3, but I went home and I took a shower and I was back here at 7. And by contrast, my longtime friend and speaker, Nando Parado, is from South America. And
Yeah.
since the first day I met him 30 years ago, I can remember, working on this ridiculous schedule, which I was so proud of. And he'd go, oh, that's not going to work. I need to rest. And at first I cringed. I literally cringed when he said the word rest because I thought, come on, if we're going to take the speaking world by the storm, we can't rest. But over time, I've realized what a wise culture and what a wise man. So, do you think
Yeah.
some of it is cultural?
I think it is. Your story about Nando makes me think of my grandfather. I still remember the first trip I ever took to India. I was 7 years old, and I remember my grandfather at that time he was in his mid 70s, but he was still working. He was a lawyer. He was still seeing clients, and he had this just amazing sort of career. But the thing that I noticed about him is that he would always sort of go out to the porch, and he would just sort of drink his chai. And I remember kind of studying him as a 7 year old, just like, what is he, what is he doing? It was so interesting and unique to me because I had never witnessed to that point in time somebody just sitting down and having a cup of chai or a cup of coffee and doing nothing else, right? Usually it was like somebody's reading a newspaper or they're watching TV or they're multitasking it, but he would just sit there and he would have his cup of chai, and just by having his cup of chai for a few minutes, that would reactivate him and he would go back and do everything else. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's very different here in India than it is in the United States. Now, one thing I will say is that the more developed countries are, I think the more we sort of fall into the sort of, go-go pattern. India today is very different than India back then. But I think it's really fascinating to see culturally. When I reflect on what you just said about Nando, who by the way I love, and I know he's such an important part of like the founding story of GDA, is that, in fact, Gail, I don't know if you remember this. First time we ever met, we had a long conversation about Nando, and it literally gave me the chills because he told me his
I remember
story.
the first time we met in Detroit with your wife,
That's
but
right.
I don't
Yes,
remember
she
that
remembers it.
conversation.
She remembers that too. Yeah. So she remembers talking to you about your daughter-in-law, who's in the fashion space, I think, right?
Yeah, an
She,
influencer. That's right.
right. That's right. And then I remember talking to you about Nando. And the thing that when I hear Nando's story or I hear this approach of rest, sometimes again we can kind of equate that with laziness, right? We need to take these periods of rest. But what I equate it to is long term, right? We are thinking very long term. If you want to get a lot done in 1 week, by all means, go grit it the hell out. Like just exhaust yourself, right? If your job is completely done after that. But when is it ever done? It's not done. We're going to get that deadline done and the next one starts, right? We're going to get this OKR met and then the next one's going to be set, right? This is the way that we live. And our job as leaders isn't to just provide fuel to our companies and to the bottom line and to our teams just for a week or a month. It's to create a system where it can live on even well past us, right? And so this is what we're working towards right now is a system where people don't get into their 40s and 50s and feel like the best years are behind them. Again, not because they don't have more knowledge or wisdom or relationships, but because they have less energy. Let's get beyond that and let's make our best years yet to come.
I love that. One thing that I have noticed, when I feel exhausted, I feel like, well, I have an excuse. My gosh, I've been doing this for what, 45 years when you count my corporate with
Yeah.
GDA. But I notice my young, vivacious team members, I'm aware of how often I will hear them say, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And you brought up my daughter-in-law, my son, man, he is go all the way. And they have 3 small kids. He's getting his MBA, but he's all the way go. Do you have any specific advice? I mean, I think you were kind of going there when you were saying you don't want to look back and the best years are gone. But for these younger people that feel like this is the time, now's when I need to be putting it all in, I'll do
Yeah.
that later. Any suggestions about the long game?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think what you're describing right now, Gail, is what we call the human energy crisis. right? Everybody's exhausted, all levels, right? And I think it's one of the most important energy crises of our time. It is the skill set of our day is to learn how to manage our energy. And if you're a leader, the skill set of the day of the time is to learn how to elevate not only your energy, but the energy of the people around you. People are getting burnt out much earlier in their careers now. And one of the very simple tools that I give people where they're like, wow, that was a game changer for me, is to practice what I call the 55-5 model. For every 55 minutes of work, whenever possible, you're building in 5 minutes of focused, deliberate rest, 55 to 5. Now, it's not always possible. You're not going to be in the middle of a key meeting or a key moment and 55 minutes is up and you say, "Oh, well, I'm out." That's not going to happen, right? But what I find is that as I audit the schedules of senior leaders all the way to new leaders, people who are just entering the workforce. There are always pockets of your day where you have allocated 60 minutes and you could get as much done in 55 minutes. It didn't need to be a 60-minute meeting. It could be a 55-minute meeting. Didn't need to be a 60-minute block of work. It could be a 55-minute block of work, right? Now, sometimes I get pushback on this because people say, look, I'm running out of time. I feel like I don't have enough hours in my day. And you're telling me to shrink my schedule by 5 minutes each hour. If I work a 9 hour day, that's 45 minutes. That's pretty significant. You're taking a big block of time out of my schedule. And I say, yes, that's true. But what the science shows us is that every one of those 5 minutes is going to make the other 55 minutes far more effective, far more creative, far more collaborative. You're going to have far more energy in what you do, more presence in what you do. And so people put this to the test, and I will tell you the most common piece of feedback, and I've now given this tool to hundreds of thousands of people over the past years. The most common piece of feedback that I get is for the first time in my career that I can remember, I have more energy at the end of the day than I did at the beginning of the day just by taking these 5 minute breaks throughout. Right? That's the most common piece of feedback. So if you're listening to this, I want you to just give that a try. 55 minutes of work to 5 minutes of rest. Put on repeat as often as you can and see how you feel at the end of the week.
That's a really good point. And what I have noticed with my team is ever since you made your visit into the office, people are doing that. They're scheduling the meetings for 25 minutes, the calls, or scheduling the meetings for 55 minutes. And a lot of times they say, I'm going to get up and take a brain break. And, we have
Great.
a beautiful surrounding here, so they can go and walk when the weather's better. And yeah, I think
Oh,
that's really working. So
I,
thank you
I, I
for that.
I love that it had an impact. That makes me so happy.
I'm sure you hear that a lot. When you're out there and you're speaking, and I know you're doing a lot of speaking, and it's a wide variety of industries. Does the message just go across the board? Are there certain industries where maybe it resonates a little bit more? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so it's been it was a busy 2024. I gave 47 talks across a lot of different industries. The three primaries were tech, finance, and healthcare, but I spoke to education, agriculture, defense. Like it was really across the board. And I think it's such a universal issue right now, which is like, look, we have a lot to get done right now. Right now, like things have never been more important for us to really kind of move forward and to have like incredibly high performance. But at the same time, we're exhausted. I can see it. I feel it. I feel it in the people around me. And so that these two things that are sort of pulling against each other. So what do we do? And I think that's a really universal problem right now.
I know other than the what did you call them? I know that the short breaks, but the what great word did you have? Oh,
The rhythmic renewal.
rhythmic renewal. Other than rhythmic renewal, are there any others like, man, start this today?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, we mentioned before this idea of looking at your energy levels like a traffic light, right? So green, yellow, red.
Okay.
What we notice amongst most people in the workforce today, especially people who have a lot of responsibility, are leaders, what we tend to do is we tend to wake up and hopefully we're somewhere in the greenish zone. So we have a good bit of energy. Kind of come to the
The
office, we feel pretty
greenish
good.
go,
Yeah, greenish
right?
go. Like I feel pretty good. And that by the end of the day, we sort of end it in a red, right? And hopefully we go home and get a good night's sleep, maybe get some exercise, whatever your routine is, and you're able to sort of get yourself back to a state of green. So we're constantly oscillating between green and red, right? When we look at the behavior patterns of high performers across all walks of life, what they're actually doing is not going from green to red, they're going from green to yellow back to green. So they're not allowing themselves to go back down to the red, right? So they're constantly lifting themselves up when they start to get into that kind of that potential danger zone, right? That potential like I'm about to burn out or I'm about to feel really sick. They'll find that time to go take a break. Now, again, why are we doing this? The reason is because it's much, much harder to go from red to yellow even than it is to go from yellow to green, right? And it sounds a little paradoxical, right? But when you get to a point where you're stressed, it is very, very hard to find relief. Now you compound that throughout the days and then compound that throughout the weeks, and eventually you get to a point where you're like, wow, like there's nothing that I can really do to get back to that greenish state, right? And that's what we don't want because then you're operating on half capacity and it's rubbing off in your work and it's rubbing off on all the people around you as well. One of the most important things you can do is you can start to monitor your energy levels throughout the day. Where am I right now? Am I at a green? Am I at a yellow? Am I at a red? Right? When you're at that yellow, that's the time for you to go take the walk. That's the time for you to go get a little stretch. That's the time for you to put your AirPods in and just listen to a song you love from beginning to end without doing anything else. If you like to breathe and meditate, that's a time to put that into practice. These are the moments to catch ourselves in the yellow so that we don't fall into the red.
Very well illustrated. I love that. We jumped right into the content. What
Yeah.
is your background that helps make you a thought leader in this area?
Yeah, yeah. So, I started a company called Rise in 2012. And Rise was one-on-one health coaching right over your mobile phone, right? Which today there's many more of those services out there. At the time, it was so unique that Tim Cook, who had just taken over as CEO of Apple, invited me into Apple headquarters to like tell him all about this service, he and his team, because nothing like this really existed at the time. The reason I started the company is because my father, who, when he was around my age, he was in his 40s, had an emergency bypass surgery. So he dropped me off to school, said, "Hey, I've got a routine medical appointment. I'm going to pick you up right here by the flagpole." I came outside. I was in fifth grade. He wasn't there. And as it turns out, they had caught basically a condition that was about to turn into a heart attack. They rushed him to the OR. By the time I was out of school, he was already on the operating table. Now, what I remember most about that time was days later, we were driving home and my mom was driving the car and she never drove the car. It was always my dad. This time, my dad was in the passenger seat and I was looking at him from the back seat of the car. And I remember thinking to myself, like, he looks so old and he looks so frail and weak. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, come on, Dad, you gotta be strong again. You gotta be a dad again. And lucky for me, like he did. He learned how to exercise. He learned how to eat better. He started to sleep better, started paying attention to these fundamental behaviors that power everything else. And he turned his entire life around. I mean, I remember at the time his doctor saying, "Hey, maybe like if he doesn't correct things, he's got like 10 years to live." And it's been over 30 years, and literally before I jumped on with you, Gail, I call him pretty much call my parents, try to call him every morning, and just to just check in, and he just walked 3 miles, and so like he is like he's the reason that I started this company because I wanted to give that type of access and care to people before they got to the place where my dad got to, right? Before they actually had sort of that emergency bypass surgery, which is happening so often now. I can't tell you the number of times that I'm on Facebook checking in and like, I see like a member of my high school class who is like abruptly passed away, right? It's scary, right? And so I started this company because I wanted to give that level of access to more people. The thing that drove that experience, we started the company. It's now owned by Amazon. We built it to a big company. We were named App of the Year by Apple. It's owned by Amazon today. It's still helping hundreds of thousands of people. The thing that I remember most from that experience is that when people would write in to talk about their progress, They lowered their A1C levels, they lost weight, they lowered their cholesterol, but they were often writing in to say, I feel like a better parent. I feel like a better teacher. I feel like a better spouse. I feel like a better leader, right? And it made clear for me at the time that this wall that we sometimes draw in between work and wellness, work and well-being, that wall actually doesn't really exist. Our work very much powers our well-being. And our well-being, by the way, very much powers our work. What is the number one factor for people's physical and mental health right now in the United States? It's actually their work. That people who are not happy at work are usually in not great health. Like there's a really, really strong link. And the person who can have the biggest influence on your physical and mental health, other than your doctor and your spouse, is actually your boss, right? Your boss can have a huge impact. So work affects our well-being, and at the same time we know that well-being affects our work. When we feel energized, when we feel like we're fit and healthy, and we're at, getting to a place where we have better health, that reflects on our work as well, because we're pouring much more presence and energy and attention and details and creativity. And that, by the way, like we've been talking about all along, that's not just for us, it's for everybody around you as well.
First of all, it's a very personal and very noble passion that drives your work. And I really love that about you. That last comment, I know we talked about in the beginning, but I've got to go back to that.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the number one stress, and it can be, I love the thing that the wall between work and well-being shouldn't exist. There's no wall there. But the number one person that can affect your well-being is your boss. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think about how much time.
That's a
it,
heavy
It's a
responsibility to hear that.
and I'm so glad you brought that up, Gail. It is a heavy responsibility. And usually when I talk to leaders about this, I get some intrepidation in the room. And I get it, right? Because we signed up as leaders to, drive business results, to build
Right.
businesses, to build business lines, and to sell products, all that stuff, right? What we didn't necessarily sign up for is for people's physical and mental health, right? And you can either take that as a burden, or you can take that as, I think, in some ways a blessing, right? Because I think with the thing that we all want to do is to have an impact on the world, right? And one of the greatest ways that we can have an impact on the world is not just through the bottom line, it's through the people around us, right? And the greatest thing that we sort of know about leaders is, gosh, their legacies, great leaders, their legacies live on. And how do they live on? Not necessarily through the products, but through the people, right? It's those people that then went on to become leaders themselves. And they said, gosh, I remember the way that Gail was. Every time she walked into a meeting, she had this etch a sketch thing that she would do. And I do that now, right? And because I do that, my people are energized, right? It's these little habits that really end up sort of cascading and rippling through people well beyond the work that we're doing right now, right? And so when we talk about the impact that we can have, I have not met a single leader yet where I've said, hey, tell me about what you want. The word impact is always used, right? I want to have an impact on the world. I want to know that I mattered. I want to know that what I did mattered, right? Gosh, what a great gift that we have been given to know that we're not just affecting the bottom lines of our company, but we're literally building energized people who are then going to go out and have their own impact. What a gift that can be.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I love it. I'm very inspired. Um, you have already made such a mark on this speaking industry. I'm curious what's next. For you as a speaker, maybe as a writer, as a thought leader, what's next?
Yeah, energy is going to I'm going to continue to sort of just go really deep into this area, right? And part
Yeah.
of the reason for that is because, if you go to Amazon and you look up time management, you're going to be met with thousands and thousands of results, right? But energy management, like how do we manage our own energy? Very sparse. There's just not a lot out there right now, right? And again, it's not that we run out of time in our lives, we run out of energy, right? So we need more in this space. And for me, I just need to continue to invest. I'm spending a lot of time on the road these days studying exceptional leaders. It's something that I really love to do. I'm hosting this show on Amazon Prime. We're in our third season, where it's kind of like Anthony Bourdain. If you followed Anthony Bourdain, I loved Anthony
Yes,
Bourdain.
yes.
And it's like Anthony Bourdain for leadership. So I go out, I fly around the world, I study great leaders doing what they do best, ranging from Martha Stewart to Ben and Jerry's to David Chang to East Academy Award winning Issa Rae. Like it's such a privilege to understand what they are doing during these unseen hours. I love that phrase. Coach Krzyzewski uses it a lot. Unseen hours. The whole idea is that great athletes are made when nobody is watching. And I think the same thing is true for leaders. We tend to study leaders when they're in the spotlight. Oh, that was interesting what they did there with that comment they made. Oh, how they communicated this. And that's fine. But what's much more important is what are they doing when nobody is watching, right? Because those are the things, those are the habits that tend to fuel everything else. So what I'm passionate about is what are people doing internally so that they can see it externally, right? And so those habits are what I'm going to continue for many, many years to come to continue to unpack. I bring those habits back to my lab at Harvard Medical School, where I'm on faculty right now. I analyze them and then I teach them. I teach them to my classrooms, I teach them inside boardrooms, and it's such a privilege to do it in front of audiences as well.
Are you able to take these interviews and pull stories into your keynote
Oh
presentations?
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I love
absolutely.
that. Because the
Absolutely.
Martha Stewart, I'm like, okay. That resonated with me,
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing is that like when I sit down with these leaders and I ask them like what is the thing? Like what was it that really sort of made it unlock for you, right? I love this quote from Gandhi. Gandhi said that the difference between what we do and what we are capable of doing is sufficient to solve the world's problems. Just that gap, just that space, right? So what I want to know is what's in that gap for you? What's the difference between what you do and what you're capable of doing? And how did these great leaders make that leap? And when I sit down with these leaders, I think that it's going to be grit. I think it's going to be determination. It's going to be commitment. All the things that we would probably brainstorm together, right? I thought Bill Gates was going to talk to me about leveraging technology. That Ben and Jerry were going to talk to me about building a great brand, right? Salman Rushdie, I thought he was going to talk to me about creative inspiration, and they did. All those topics came up, but it all came back down to energy. One fundamental quality, which is energy. Because without energy, we can't do any of the other things. I might be brilliant. I might have tremendous potential in all these other areas. But if I don't have energy, then I can't really bring that to bear. I can't really, I can't express that to the world. And so for me, it's okay, how do these unseen hour habits then power everything else? And Gail, that's what I'm passionate about.
Um, the last thing I want to focus on is just some key takeaway for our meeting planners.
Sure.
So this is January. This is the month of the global sales kickoff. Do you have a way to tweak your message for salespeople that have quotas, have numbers? I mean, does this land with that audience?
Oh yeah, yeah. Because it's go time, right? It's go
Yeah.
time. Like it's what I call the game of now. It's not the game of someday, it's the game of now. And the way that the game of now is different than the game of someday is that you are not waiting for readiness in order to take action. You're taking action and you're letting readiness catch up along the way. Right? And the number one thing that I have realized from people who have been able to change the world around them, people inside companies, people who've started their own companies, people in sales, people all, is that they never waited for this moment where they felt like they were ready to go take action. They took action and then they let readiness catch up along the way. Neuroscientists call this behavioral activation, right? Emotions can create action, but action can also lead to emotions, right? And so we can use that to our advantage by getting to a place of action. So it's January. We have sales quotas. We have a lot of work to do. It's a big year ahead. It's time to play the game of now. And Gail, my favorite game of now story, because I tell lots of game of now stories in my talk, but my favorite one was the story of a woman named Damayanti Hingorani. And Damayanti Hingorani was a refugee. She was born and raised in poverty. She had no running water, no electricity, and she decided she wanted to become an engineer with Ford Motor Company, right? Like just a completely unbelievable sort of dream, unlikely. But her village collected enough money to put her on a boat to the United States, where she got a scholarship to Oklahoma State University. Where then after that, she went to Detroit, Michigan, applied for her dream job. After getting rejected over and over again, she becomes Ford Motor Company's first ever female engineer. And that story changes things because it teaches people to play the game of now. All these other women who wanted to rise in the workforce, that wanted to become engineers too, she was able to influence them. And the reason that I tell this story at the very end of my talk is because Damayanti Hingorani is my mom.
No, I love that story. I love it. And I think I saw that you brought her on stage at something this past year.
Yeah, that was unbelievable. We did a thing that was sponsored by Eli Lilly in Indiana, and it was just like it was great because we were back in the Midwest, the two of us, like I grew up in Detroit, and I got to bring her on stage, and unsurprisingly, she stole the show. I got to we got to tell stories together. She's a great example of everything we're talking about. Because the energy that she brings, and by the way, this is great, like because we all know somebody in our lives who has that energy, living or not. We've all been exposed to somebody who just has this incredible way of like walking into a room and bringing something extra. And the wonderful thing, Gail, is that we can channel that person anytime we want. So sometimes I'll be backstage before a talk, and it's a bright and early talk, and it's and I'm feeling just like a little bit like I need a little extra in this moment. I channel my mom. Like I literally just sit there and I channel her, and I come out on stage and I'm just like I'm at a level 11.
Oh,
And
I love that. That
so
is such a
it's
great,
something any of
great.
us can do. You can always channel somebody that you admire.
Well, if you ask me, that's the perfect mic drop moment. Any son who shouts out to his mother, that's a perfect ending. And I just can't thank you enough. It's just such a great, great, great reminder of the impact that we all have on each other, and that energy is a finite resource and we got to take care of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see you again and be in your audience.
I can't wait to reconnect with you in person, Gail. I
Yeah.
love everything you're building, you and your team, and it's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Backstage Pass with Gail Davis. Tune in for more exclusive interviews and pro tips to elevate your events. Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts with us. We'll catch you next time behind the curtain on Backstage Pass.